Next, we'll look at how do we choose from between many projects that you may have. Uh, because more often than not, any organization will be under resource constraints. So you may see a lot of great projects, but all of them may not be suited for taking up immediately. Some of them will have to wait. So how do you choose from among projects? So there are three different techniques that I'll talk about. Uh, and there is a small exercise also that is coming. So the first one is list down critical success factors. Uh, that these are basically most important factors that have made your business successful. So, say if you are a restaurant, it may be the location, it may be the quality of food, or it may be the brand. So, any of these could be your critical success factor. And like that, different businesses will have different factors that are critical to their success. So, out of these, so if you have, four or five different projects, and some of them are pertaining to a critical success factor, something which is critical to you, then you would want to do that project first. And something which does not affect a CSF, critical success factor, I would not immediately take it up. I will do it only if there is money available. If money is not there, I will not take it immediately, right? So on this, I would like you to do this exercise in groups. And this is an exercise which will be a continuation of the last time's technology selection exercise, because many groups could not submit their work. So I have created a new assignment in Moodle, which you can take it up, and I have added a question number 8 in the end, which is about listing down the critical success factors. So take maybe 5 minutes to identify what is most critical for your business to succeed, and list it down there, and then you can move on with the rest of the video. And we'll be discussing these at the end. I mean, after everybody has seen the videos, then we will proceed with your submissions and any doubts that you may have. Now, next tool that we have is known as the cost benefit analysis. So as the name suggests, you will check out how much it costs for the project to implement. You will, some of the groups have already assessed how much would it cost to implement. You may need some money for the hardware and the software licenses, and some networking, some development efforts, plus some training may be needed for different people. So all of this is your cost. So against that, are you going to benefit anything? Are you going to save time of employees, or are you going to save on some lesser rejections, lesser headache, and so on? So you would try to quantify everything and see that does this make sense. So you may have a shelf of say 10-12 projects, of which maybe 4 or 5 projects are such that where benefits are greater than cost, and it makes sense for you to take those, and the other projects are too costly and they don't justify the investment, so you won't take. In other words, sometimes you will hear the term business case. Is there a business case for this? So that's what is checked in this tool. I think it is quite intuitive what is done. But still, if there are any questions, we will take them towards the end. Now, the third tool that we have is there are some models which score alternate solutions. Let us say the e-commerce example, that you want to start selling your products online. So there may be alternatives. Someone may say that let us build our own website and start selling through that. Someone will say that okay, let us partner with Amazon and or Flipkart and start selling through them, instead of having to develop our own thing. And a third person may come up with some other alternative and all that. So these are all alternate solutions for the same business problem. Now, how do you evaluate which is a good solution and which is not a good solution, or which is the best solution among the 3-4 and which we should choose. So naturally you would want to see the pros and cons of each, and then proceed. So I'll want to share one sort of example from not strictly a related field, but I thought it is pertinent here. So many of you would have seen these ramp walks done by models, right? There are dedicated channels and other resources where you see these. So I I don't know if you ever paid attention, but there are people sitting around the ramp, who are usually people who are invited audience, means it's not that anybody can walk in and sit. But then, and there are sort of many people, I mean first row, second row, third row and all that. Then one of these days I noticed that these guys are sitting with something in their hand. They are going on a fashion show and going with a notebook. I mean, even if they are sitting on the first bench, it doesn't give them right that they should start carrying books and notebooks and pen and paper with them. But they do, and I have seen it uh, fashion show after fashion show. There are a lot of people who carry these things. So it got me thinking what exactly they do. So I figured out that these are the people basically who have some taste of fashion. They have some knowledge of fashion. So these are so-called experts in that field. They are either fashion designers themselves or some other celebrities who know what fashion is. I mean, unlike someone like me, because I usually wear the same thing again and again. So what do they do? So basically they are rating different dresses, because the fashion show is basically a showcase of the work of the designer, and based on that showcase the different companies will pick certain designs, and they will say that yes, we want to start making this type of dress and that type of dress and all that. So these so-called experts are basically rating different dresses and seeing what is the next trend. So which of these dresses is going to be picked up next? What will become more popular in the coming, say, fall season or summer season or spring season. So that is what they are basically trying to judge, and there is no yardstick for that. It's not like if you have more flowers, then it will sell more, or if it has light color, it will sell more, or if it has dark color, it will sell more. There is no yardstick. I mean, it has to be appealing, and that visual appeal cannot be quantified easily. So that's why you depend on these people who will sit and judge that yes, this dress is probably 8 out of 10, this is 6 out of 10, this is 3 out of 10, and so on. And then they apply a sort of an averaging or some sort of a sort of aggregation of all the scores, because there are so many people sitting and they may not necessarily agree on the answers, and that is called as this Delphi technique, where you come together, or basically you bring together all the answers and try to find a consensus among all experts. In a way, basically what you will do is you will remove the outliers. Someone may have given just 1.0 out of 10. So you may remove that and take a simple average of all of them, or you may do sometimes a weighted average, because some people may be more, you can say, reliable or more reputed than some others. Then another thing that you could do is, instead of asking them to rate single rating, you ask them to give a breakup, that on style how much, on color how much, and on model how much, and all that, on fitting how much, and so on. So, and then you give different weights to different things and then do it. So all those are alternate ways of finding out how which is the best solution in your in your bouquet. So that's the third method. So we saw three different methods for selecting what project can be chosen, and these help us in deploying our resources in a frugal way or in an optimum way. Next, we'll move to slightly more boring things, that is, what are the different stages in development of MIS. So many of you may be already knowing this, but we know, so we start with this first step of system analysis, where we try to find out what solution we want. Then second is the design of the system, which is to design the solution. The output of that will be specifying the requirements. So something which you did in the technology selection, what kind of hardware you want, or how will the user interface look like, or what should be the speed or responsiveness. So if you are opening a website of a bank, and if it takes 2 or 3 seconds to load every page, is it all right or is it not all right? So that's a requirement specification. Someone may say that it must load within 200 milliseconds, and someone may say that it's okay even if it loads in 3 or 4 seconds, but it should load completely without any errors and all that. So all these are fault tolerance, or amount of load it can handle, what will it look like. All these are your requirements that you specify. So mind you, this is a traditional life cycle, what is called as a waterfall model. So unless your previous step is over, your next step cannot start. But we have already seen from some of your presentations there are alternatives to that, and we'll talk about them also in a bit. Next is you develop the system, as per the requirements. So now your development team will sit and start writing the code or setting the configuration, and do everything, putting everything together. Then next step is your acceptance testing, which is also called as user acceptance testing. So you show the developed product to the user. Sometimes it's a prototype, sometimes it's a final product also, and ask the user to test, what is called as the beta testing. Then the next step is migration. So once the testing is okay, you move to the next step. If testing is not okay, you may have to go back to the drawing board or to the development stage. Migration means all the records and data in the legacy system, or what the customers, the client was currently maintaining, that has to be shifted to the new platform. So that is, if they are maintaining paper format books, then everything has to be manually entered into online system. Sometimes it may be automated also. So that is your migration. Sometimes they may be on an old system, like it is a COBOL or Fortran based system, Windows MS-DOS based system, which you want to now move to latest and greatest software. So that's also a migration. Next is documentation. Quite often documentation happens along with the development also, in which you are basically telling what is happening, what the system was, what it is going to be, what each and every button is, where which part of code does what. So documentation, of course, as those of you who have worked in IT would know, it is hated by the programmers, and it is never to the satisfaction of the neither the end users nor the um, people who are designing the systems. So there is a lot that is wanted. Then you have the production stage, where the application has gone live, or also called to be gone in production. So until acceptance testing, it is in beta, and then next stage is the production. Quite often they are two different servers of same or similar configuration, and same or similar data. Right? Then production go live is where everybody can start using that system that you have designed. And lastly, you may have maintenance, because after you start operating, you may discover some bugs, or you may want some extra features, or something you thought will work in a certain way, but it does not. It crashes too often, or it. So for that, you may have to start debugging, or do a little bit more development. or sometimes sort of close some of the loopholes, security loopholes, or some other things you may have kept. So these are basic steps in the development of an IT system. Uh, you would uh, you would see that a lot of efforts are going into this development stage, and sometimes some of the other later stages. But if you don't spend good efforts in the first three boxes, uh, the chances of failure increase. So you need to be a little more careful in the first initial stages to be able to design it well and specify the requirements well, to be able to come up with a good product. Otherwise, the software projects are known to be notoriously sort of getting delayed and all. The most famous example which is going on these days is the Infosys's implementation of the income tax department portal. It went live, I think, in the first week of June, and this is the last week of October. Still, I have not been able to file my returns through ITR2, and it has all kinds of errors which keep coming. I mean, so it's a disaster, I would say. They It would have been better if they continued with the old system and released the new system next year rather than doing it in a hurry. So that's something which all of us have lessons to take from. Now, and this is not the only place. I mean, there have been examples everywhere about failed or botched up implementation of different IT projects, and where you don't achieve the intended benefits that you wanted. Quickly moving to next part, which is the alternate approaches. So we talked about that waterfall model where you go one by one, but then there are other ways in which systems can be developed as well. uh, where do I start? Yeah, so this is the traditional one. Next is the prototype development, where you build a small prototype, a smaller scale. It won't have all the features, and show it to client, and then if client agrees, you develop the rest of the things. Client suggests some tweaks, you do those tweaks, and then do the development. So there, uh, chances of big blunders happening are rare. uh, you are kind of taking client on board from early days as well itself. Another variation in that is rapid application development, RAD. Sometimes it is also called as, or there is a variant of it called as JAD, joint application development, where client also does some work and you also do some work, and you collectively kind of develop together. And rapid means it follows all these agile scrum type of methodologies, where your deadlines are in days, not in months. So you may be meeting every week and seeing, okay, by the end of the week, let us have this part ready, and you launch it. And then next week you will add some more and launch it, and so on. So you look at any modern website or application, you will see that they keep launching new features week after week, which is because of this, that they are developing. I mean, they are not waiting for the whole application to be ready and then launch it. They are doing small bit-sized developments week after week. The good part about it is, again, the user as well as the client both are on board from the early days itself, and you can keep reiterating. So there are lots of methodology, and it's a course in itself, so I'm not getting into that, because yeah, that's a huge area. Next is your end user development. Why wait for a programmer to sort of come and give you the software? Why not give the power in the hands of the user itself? Example that comes to my mind is most Microsoft Office products have a Visual Basic developer part also, what is called as macro. So a user can write macros either through using a walkthrough or by writing code also, depending on the sort of abilities of the user. Many databases have this feature where you don't have to wait for someone to write an SQL query. The database have the UI interface, what is called as a query builder, which helps you do the development yourself. You can generate your own report, you can generate your own queries and all that. So that is an end user development rather than having a user write to you saying that हमको ये बना के दो. You give the power in the hands of the user itself. So similarly, SAP has ABAP, which allows you to do some small developments. You don't have to every time wait for the next release. You can do your own small developments. Next is application software package, which is more of the application development itself. But this time it's not a custom application, it's a suite. For example, Adobe has its own suite, Microsoft Office is its suite. So that is one way of development. The challenges are different because you have to worry about compatibilities and such issues, that how you want them to be integrated together. Lastly, the service oriented, as you would have imagined by now. Some of you also gave a presentation on this. This is basically your software as a service. Rather than building a system and then selling it as a CD, I am now selling it as a service. And that gives a lot more centralized control in the hand of the developer. Developer can make changes on the go. Unlike a say traditional one where the developer has to create a patch if there are some issues or bugs, send it the patch, upload that patch, install that patch, and see that it works in all situations. But in a service oriented architecture, you don't worry about all that, because the final run is happening on your own servers. The end user is only getting a web interface. So that's a totally different way of looking at the um, developing an IT system. So these are basically different approaches, and they suit in different circumstances. Some of them are good for some applications, and some others are good for some other setup. So there is no one size fits all, but as a designer of a system or as a user of the system, you should be aware of these alternatives that are there, and the most suitable alternative you would use for a most suited situation. And a lot of this has to do with experience. Um, you may not as a fresh programmer or as a fresh architect or as a fresh business analyst, you may not be able to suggest what is right in a particular situation, but slowly you learn. So it's both an art and a science. But through this course, my job was to let you know that these alternatives exist. Right? So I'll pause with this, and we'll have questions and other things, and then subsequently I will move on to the MIS design.